The Crusades were a series of military expeditions focused on liberating the Holy Land from Muslim control. The objective consists of restoring the Apostolic Roman authority in the territory where the episodes related on the Bible took place. Today, I'm going to tell you how the idea of the Crusades came from and what happened in the 9 best known. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II summoned the Christians for the First Crusade. 1 year later, in 1096, they began their journey. Some went by boat, others on horseback, and the rest on foot. This crusade lasted until the year 1099 and ended in Christian victory. The Second Crusade took place between 1147 and 1149, and the Muslims won it. The cause was the fall of the county of Edessa in 1144. After the First Crusade, small Crusader states had been formed. The county of Edessa was the first to rise and the first to fall. In 1187, after the Battle of the Horns of Hattin, Jerusalem fell to Sultan Saladin. The fall of Jerusalem was a severe setback for Christianity. Emperor Frederick I was the first to go. Other European monarchs involved in the Crusades were Richard I of England, known as Richard the Lionheart, and Philip II of France. This time the Byzantine Empire fought the Crusaders, as Emperor Isaac II Angelo allied himself with Saladin when the Crusaders crossed the Byzantine border. In response, Frederick I occupied the center of the Rune Sultanate, but drowned while trying to cross the Salef River. Philip II ended up abandoning the crusade, so the conflict centered between Richard and Saladin. This crusade takes place between the years 1189 and 1192, ending again with a Muslim victory. In 1192, the Treaty of Ranla was signed, in which Saladin and Richard the Lionheart agreed a Muslim control of Jerusalem, but had allowed the opening of the city to the Christian pilgrimage and commerce. The Fourth Crusade occurred between 1202 and 1204, after the proclamation of a new crusade in 1198 by Pope Innocent III. The intention was the same, to liberate the Holy Land, but in the end there was no combat between Christians and their supposed enemies, and the Crusaders ended up sacking Constantinople. The overland route was not an option, because the Balkans had become a dangerous area. The Crusaders hired the Duke of Venice, Enrico Dandolo, to take care of the transport by sea. However, the Crusaders did not get enough money to cover the service of the Duke, so he offered to postpone the debt in exchange for conquering the Hungarian city of Serra for Venice. And so it was done, even with the Pope against it. That is why the Pope ended up excommunicating all the Crusaders. The news came to Serra that the Emperor Isaac II Angelo had been captured and betrayed by his brother Alexios III, who had usurped the throne. Then Alexios IV, son of Isaac II, proposed to the Crusaders to change the course of the crusade towards Constantinople, to depose the one who has dethroned his father. Alexios IV, in return, promised to pay the debt that the Crusaders had with the Venetians, and offered soldiers to conquer Jerusalem. The Crusaders managed to enter Constantinople, and Alexios III fled. But the political situation was complex, and Alexios IV could not fulfill his commitments. Finally, the Crusaders sacked Constantinople for several days. The Fifth Crusade took place between 1217 and 1221. It was completely ineffective and hardly changed the already existing power relations between Christians and Muslims. The objective was to end the Ayyubi Empire and regain Jerusalem. Later in 1218, William I of Holland and Oliver of Cologne joined the crusade to attack the Egyptian city of Damietta. After conquering Damietta, the Crusaders advanced into Egypt and headed for Cairo, but Sultan al-Kamil repelled them. After their redemption, the Crusaders lost Damietta, and al-Kamil accepted an 8-year peace treaty. It was developed between 1228 and 1229. In it, Emperor Frederick II Hohenstaufen of the Roman Germanic Empire managed to get Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Nazareth delivered to him through a diplomatic agreement with Al-Kamil. By this treaty, Al-Kamil ceded territories to Frederick in exchange for his supporting him al-Nasser and establishing a 10-year truce. Frederick II's relationship with Pope Gregory IX was tense, so much so the king was excommunicated in 1227. In 1228, he left without papal approval to end up becoming King of Jerusalem. It took place between 1248 and 1254 and was headed by Louis IX of France. Previously, in 1244, the Muslims again took Jerusalem and attacked the dominions in the area. Pope Innocent IV summoned a crusade at the Council of Lyon in 1245, handing over the leadership of it to King Louis. The expedition went to Damietta, and at first they managed to conquer it. As in the Fifth Crusade, the Christians advanced towards Cairo, but this time leaving Damietta protected. However, the result was the same, as the Crusaders had to surrender to the Egyptians, and Louis IX was captured. He was finally released after paying a ransom. The 8th and the 9th Crusades can be told in the same story. This is because the 9th starts right when the 8th ends. So depending on how they are counted, there may be 8 or 9 crusades. Well, now the last crusade. It took place in the year 1270. King Louis IX of France was, again, who led it. In this campaign, the French king failed again, this time in his attempt to Christianize Tunisia. The Emir managed to defend the city from the Christian invasion. Louis IX and a large part of his army died from disease. Prince Edward, he has the same name as me, who would later become King Edward I of England, intended to join Louis in Tunis, but the French had already died and his army was preparing to return. Still, the Englishman headed for Acre with a small army. After several combats, the crusade ended with the signing of a truce, ending everything in 1272. Well, I hope you liked this informative video, that you have learned something new, and that above all of you have enjoyed it. Ciao ciao, and until next time, goodbye!